Hello, welcome back to Volo's Guide to Monsters Deluxe. Today we are reading the chapter about giants, the world shakers. The saga of giantkind began in the dawn of the world. Elves had yet to set dainty foot out of the Fey realm when the thunder of the giant's step shook the world to its bones, and even the dragons were yet unaware of the power and glory they would attain. The record of that early age had already vanished into the mists of legend by the time humankind came onto the scene. Now, not even the giants know the full truth of their beginnings. All that the giants and their kin know for certain is that they are sibling races. Humanoids, such as elves, humans, and dwarfs, are more similar in size and shape than the disparate giant types are to one another. But those races have no shared heritage. In contrast, every true giant, regardless of type, can trace its ancestry directly to Anarm, the All-Father. Most giants believe that Anarm took a number of consorts in addition to his mate Othea, accounting for the variety in appearance and abilities among the types of giantkind. Giants and giantkin rank among the world's most fearsome creatures, literally towering over the other, younger beings that crowd the world. Yet nowadays most giants live in isolation or in obscure locations, exhibiting none of the collective grandeur and power of their forebears. Encountering a giant can be an awe-inspiring and disorienting experience. First comes a rhythmic booming, felt more than heard, that resolves slowly into the sound of footsteps. A giant is near. Loose stones vibrate and tumble down the hillside. Trees sway, then bend aside as the colossus emerges. How can anything be that big? Is it a trick of perspective? When giants first appear before a band of adventurers, they demonstrate the qualities that make them spectacular to behold. Giants are huge. Most giants can easily peer in a second-floor window. The larger ones would have to stoop to get down to that level. A giant's metal hammer could serve as an anvil for a human smith, and a giant's shield is bigger and heavier than a feasting table. Giants are heavy. If a giant sits on a wagon, its wheels and axles are liable to snap like twigs. A giant can crush a house or capsize a ship simply by carelessly shifting its weight. An ox that strays too close to a sleeping giant could wind up pinned or crushed if the giant rolls over suddenly. Giants are loud. The footsteps of giants in the distance are often initially mistaken for thunder, even on a clear day. The sound of a giant beating a weapon against its shield and bellowing a challenge to foes are strident enough to knock dishes from shelves and rattle doors in their frames. Giants are strong. A charging warhorse at full gallop, capable of bowling over a line of human warriors, merely crumples against the bulk of a giant. A giant could kick a cart with enough force to send it smashing through a house, and a giant's club, the size of, if not actually, an entire tree, could level the same house with a single blow. Children of the Allfather. In an age before human and elf, when all dragons were young, Anarm the Allfather put the first giants upon the world. These giants were reflections of his divine offspring and also children of the world, birthed from the marrow of mountains, the hot blood of volcanoes, and the breath of hurricanes. Anarm conceived the giants to be masters of the world. He gave them great hate so they would look down on all they ruled. He created a hierarchy for his children, the ordning, so that all would know their status with respect to one another, and would know who among them stood nearest the knee of the Allfather. United in purpose, Anarm's children built Ostoria, the fabled empire of the giants, where they lived according to the ordning. Storm giants ruled all from both below and above. They held sway over the oceans from under sea fortresses and lorded over the land from castles in the sky. Cloud giants built immense floating cities and served the storm giants as their strong right hands. Stone giants and fire giants settled on the mountain tops and in the sprawling caverns beneath them, where they carved and forged the greatest works of giant art and craft. Frost giants defended Ostoria with the might of their arms, not just on the chilly peaks and glaciers, but on every frontier. Hill giants sprawled all over the lands, subjugating lesser creatures through brute force. Beginning of the end. All told, the empire of Ostoria dominated the world for 4 millennia before its decline began in a genocidal struggle against the dragons that came to be known as the 1,000-Year War. Dragons had lived in and around Ostoria in relative peace since the empire's foundation. Conflicts between dragons and giants in those days were personal, not tribal or regional, and usually involved bragging rights or hunting territory. Differences were settled by individual contests of might, wits, or skill. That situation persisted for generations, until the red dragon Garrix inflamed the greed and envy in its followers by railing against the giants' prosperity, and they rose up in response. At least, that's what most giants believe to have happened. No one really knows any longer what set off the war, but once battle began, the long-standing peace between giants and dragons crumbled everywhere. Foes tore at each other's throats in all parts of Ostoria. There were no front lines or safe havens, only endless ambushes, sieges, and atrocities committed against giants and dragons alike. Eventually, none were left alive on either side who had seen the war's beginning. Age and brutality had claimed them all, and the few giants and dragons then alive had spent their entire existence at war. The 1,000-Year War didn't truly end so much as it wasted away through attrition and exhaustion. The realm that could still be called Ostoria survived only far in the north. A few outposts and fragment kingdoms, such as the fire giants Helligheim and the stone giants Nederheim, clung to life in deep caverns and hidden valleys. In the millennia that followed, even those places fell, and what remained of Ostorian territory became barren, shrouded in ice as thick as mountains. Since that time, many lesser races have attained greatness and themselves fallen into obscurity. Even hints of the giant's once great empire have survived the relentless accumulation of years. But the giants remember. Their empire and their unified purpose are long gone, but a yearning for return to the greatness that was once theirs burns in all their memories. Anarm's offspring, the giant pantheon. When Ostoria fell, Anarm disowned his children, swearing never to regard the giants again until they returned Ostoria to its past prominence and reclaimed their rightful positions as rulers of the world. Giants, therefore, don't pray to Anarm, who refuses to hear them. Instead, they revere his divine children as well as a host of other hero deities and godly villains that are minor members of the pantheon. Chief among the giant gods are the 6 sons of Anarm. The brothers are Stronmaus, champion and favorite of storm giants, Memnor, cloud giants, Surtur, fire giants, Thrym, frost giants, Skoreos, stone bones, stone giants, and Grolantor, hill giants. Although each of Anarm's sons is typically worshipped by giants of a particular type, they, like Anarm himself, aren't racially distinct. Stronmaus, for example, doesn't look like a storm giant, though he is often depicted as one in carvings and other art. Like Anarm and each of his brothers, Stronmaus is a unique godly being with no mortal equivalent. His temperament and interests are similar to those of the storm giants, so most of his followers are of that type. Similar statements can be made about the other 5 brothers. Most cloud giants revere Memnor, for example, but many reject him because of his deceitfulness and venerate Stronmaus instead. A storm giant living amid blizzards and icebergs in the far northern sea might pay homage to Thrym rather than Stronmaus. Giants that had given up hope of rising in the ordning sometimes worship Vaprak the Destroyer, who is recognized by giants as the father of trolls and ogres. Giants don't worship male deities exclusively either. Anarm's mate Othea, Hiatea the huntress and home warden, Ialanis the goddess of love and peace, and Diancastra, an impetuous and arrogant trickster, have substantial followings. Like humans, some giants even fall prey to demon cults, in which they pay homage to a demon lord such as Baphomet or Keschi. Worshipping such entities or any non-giant deity is considered a great sin against the ordning. Being discovered means being cast out from family and clan. The giant tongue. The language that giants share is one of the few remnants of their once grand empire. Over time it has fragmented into many dialects, and each type has its own distinctive accent, but giants of different types can generally understand one another. Any non-giant who learns the giant language can converse with all types of giants, but giants sometimes have a hard time hearing the tiny voices of human-sized creatures, and some vowel sounds emitted by giants are nearly impossible to reproduce for any creature that doesn't have lungs as large as beer barrels. Maat and Maug. 2 words have special significance in the giant language and the giant's worldview. Neither one of them translates directly into common or any other language, because the definitions encompass several related concepts. Mod is the term giants use to describe ideas, behaviors, creatures and objects that they consider good, holy, honorable, or desirable. Morg is the counterpart term, embodying what other languages call evil, unholy, dishonorable, or undesirable. Individual giants aren't necessarily thought of as Mod or Morg, but their kin. What matters isn't a giant's personal philosophy, but its standing within the ordning, which is influenced by behavior and attitude, but also by a host of other factors. Every individual commits both Mod and Morg acts, and rises or falls in the ordning as a consequence. A giant isn't judged by other giants on the basis of whether what it did was inherently good or evil, but on whether its actions enhanced or diminished the qualities giants admire, the giantness, if you will, in themselves and their clans. A storm giant, for example, might see the raiding practices of hill giants as distasteful but not Morg, because brutal raiding is an inborn trait of the hill giants. If those same hill giants worshipped Yenogu, however, that act would represent a flagrant turning away from the tradition of the ordning. Hill giants who chose the path make themselves Morg. Non-giants are considered Morg out of hand and must usually prove themselves Mod to gain a giant's respect. Runes and tale carvings. For much of their written communication, giants use a modified version of the runic letter forms claimed by the dwarves as their own. This alphabet is used widely today, including by many traditional enemies of the dwarf, such as orcs, giants, and goblinoids. That giants were the first in the world and thus the creators of the script is a fact that giants take for granted, but which dwarfs hotly dispute. Many giants are illiterate, or nearly so, particularly hill, frost, and fire giants, which place little value on learning. Instead of writing stories with words, they typically tell their tales with pictograms etched in wood, ice, stone, or even earth, in the case of hill giants. These tale carvings relate legends on the stories of important events or meetings, in the manner of highly sophisticated cave paintings. Often they employ aspects of legends about the giant pantheon. For example, Memnor's face or head floating above the shoulders of another giant indicates that the giant was a liar or a deceiver. A depiction of Ialanis being stabbed in the back represents the betrayal of love. Such symbols and visual allegories are well understood by giants, but they can be indecipherable to viewers who aren't steeped in the giant's mythology. Most non-giants find a tale carving as unintelligible as giants would find poetry written in Elvish. Giants and magic. Giants have a paradoxical relationship with magic. The most outwardly magical are the cloud giants, followed closely by storm giants. Both types have an innate ability to use some forms of magic related to air, weather, and gravity. Very few giants, however, study magic in the way that humans, dwarves, and elves do. Arcane scholarship by itself isn't acknowledged by the ordning. It isn't Morg, but it isn't Mod either. Mastering the secrets of magic, though, demands a degree of devotion that would take giants away from pursuits that are valued by the ordning. As a consequence, this path is rarely taken. The exception is rune magic. Giants are drawn to the solidity and permanence of magical runes. Stone giants are great practitioners of rune carving, both because the artistry it demands and because their environment is perfect for its use. At least a few rune cutters can be found among any type of giants, even the slow-witted hill giants who stomp enormous marks into hillsides or goad them into their own flesh. Crafting this form of magic is painstakingly slow. Imagine a wizard who crafts a scroll and who eschews the convenience of parchment and ink in favor of stone and chisel, glacier and axe, or iron and forge. Carving a magical rune into an item imbues it with power. Like any other magic item, it can be used to activate one or more magical effects. A magical rune can also be inscribed upon a surface to create effects similar to those of a glyph of warding or symbol spell. The rune itself determines what sort of magic the item or surface holds. For example, a storm rune carved into a stone might allow the stone's possessor to control the weather. The same rune carved into a door or chest might deal thunder damage to anyone who opens it. A giant's bag. A giant on the move always has a sack slung over its shoulder. The primary purpose of a giant's bag is to carry food. With such an enormous belly to feed, particularly in the case of hill giants, it's unwise for a giant to travel without a supply of nourishment. Giants also carry rocks in their bags, a few for battle, a few others for hunting, and one or two special ones for games. Beyond that, a bag might contain anything: tools, mementos, items for trade, or merely a curious the giant wanted to bring along. Some possible contents are a live pig, 3 bear skins, longsword wrapped in a blood-caked cloak used as a knife, keg of ale, caged halfling for amusement, chest full of broken window glass, human's backpack filled with coins, skull of an owl bear, large bundle of dry wood tied up with vines, 4 mostly intact wagon wheels, and a tombstone for skipping across water. Champions of rock throwing. Giants have a well-deserved reputation as living siege engines. All of them can hurl boulders with accuracy across great distances. Rock throwing, for battle, hunting, and sport, is a tradition that goes back to the ancient times of the giants. Other races developed the sling, the spear thrower, or the bow to artificially improve the strength and accuracy of their ranged attacks, but giants never perceived the need for mechanical assistance. Even in places where giants have adapted bows or javelins for use in combat, they've never neglected the straightforward strategy of picking up a rock and letting it fly. Few activities, in fact, seem to give them as much satisfaction as the simple act of tossing boulders. Most of the game that giants play involve throwing rocks in ways that hone their skills for hunting and war. One of the most popular contests, especially among fire giants, involves nothing more than taking turns trying to knock each other down with boulders. Frost giants build targets out of snow and ice and compete to see who can knock down the most with a single toss. A popular one-on-one game begins with a challenger throwing a stone as far as it can. The giant who was challenged then goes to where the stone landed and hurls it back at the challenger. A challenger who is stronger wins because the return throw will fall short, but a giant who took on a better thrower will stumble away, nursing its injuries, as a lesson that arrogance has a price. In battle against puny creatures, giants use boulders that fit in one hand. When giants fight enormous foes, such as dragons, or enormous targets, such as castles, they prefer to hurl stones so large that even a giant must use both arms to lift and throw one. Giants throw just as accurately with both arms as with one, a feat most humans would find impossible. These attacks are effective only at shorter ranges, however, for obvious reasons. When they hunt by rock throwing, giants use smaller stones, about the size of a human head, that can kill an elk or a bear without smashing it into pulp. How to lay a giant low. A force allied with giants, or worse, a force made up of giants, is one of the most fearsome opponents on the battlefield. The giants can rain boulders onto an enemy from a distance where only skilled archers, heavy siege weapons, or spellcasters can strike back at them. At first blush, it might seem that a potent wizard could make the best giant killer, but few spellcasters can stand up to a giant in direct confrontation. One might do harm to a giant, but odds are it will survive the one or two spells that can be thrown at it before a well-placed boulder or a swing from an enormous club squashes the threat. Among those with experience fighting giants, dwarves have developed the most effective tactics. To defeat a giant, dwarves rely on prolonged, accurate, masked archery, favoring heavy crossbows for such work, fast-moving cavalry that can force the giant into a disadvantageous position, or fanatical troops armed with pole arms, ropes, and grappling hooks. If a giant can be tripped or pulled down, preferably onto its belly so it's less able to defend itself, then it can be entangled in nets and cables and disabled by concentrated attacks on its head and neck. On the other side of the field, giants understand that smaller foes will try to target their legs and lower bodies. Thus, when they head into a fight against human-sized opponents, they don thick boots, greaves armored codpieces, and wide heavy hide or metal belts to protect their bellies. Even savage hill giants peel thick bark from trees and strap it around their legs and dangle logs or stones from their belts to make the going more perilous for an enemy that tries to get underfoot. Living the giant life. Giants are exceptionally long-lived compared to humans, but none are immortal. A peaceful death from old age is a common occurrence among cloud giants and storm giants, and isn't unusual among stone giants and fire giants. It's the exception among hill giants and frost giants, most of which die violently in battle against humans, dragons, other monsters, or their own kind. Giants live at a slower pace than humans do. In the space of 4 heartbeats for a man, A stone giant's great heart beats just once. Giant mothers stay with their child far longer than human mothers do, and giant children grow to adulthood more slowly. Giants' families are small because a couple seldom has more than a few children, and many have none at all. The lifespans of the various types of giants are generally in keeping with their place in the ordning. The lowliest giants have the shortest lifespans, and the noblest giants are the longest lived. Some giants are the exception because of their long lifespans. Despite their low position in the ordning, other giants consider stone giants to be the wisest of all giant types, just as Scotty or Stone Bones is often seen as the wisest of the giant gods. Cloud giants. Cloud giants are aptly named, or at least were at one time. Few of them live literally on clouds anymore, but most do reside atop high mountains, inside or even above a near-perpetual cloud layer. A select few, those at the apex of the clan's ordning, claim the last of the ancient cloud castles that still drift across the sky. No one can build those majestic structures any longer. The methods of their construction were lost, along with much more knowledge, when Astoria fell. Some cloud giants believe the information might yet be buried in some long-forgotten, ruined library. Rumors of its existence crop up from time to time, stirring debate and dreams of resurgent glory among the cloud giants, but definite information has proven impossible to obtain. Many cloud giants think that someday a hero will unearth this ancient secret. Until then, they must be satisfied with watching clouds drift past their mountain-top homes, instead of living atop those clouds as in days of yore. Family first. Most types of giants live communally in large groups of clanmates, but the central unit of cloud giant life is the family. A mated pair, their offspring, if any, and perhaps a couple of close relatives. Cloud giants prefer not to congregate in great numbers in any one place, to avoid drawing too much attention. It's not that they fear attack from humanoids or monsters, because few creatures other than dragons can challenge them. But if more than a few lived in the same place, the size of their combined treasure hoard would attract an incessant stream of adventurers and other would-be thieves, and nuisance on the order of rats in the larder. Despite the distances that separate the homes of families, cloud giants aren't isolated. Every family or individual knows where its nearest neighbors are, even if the location is hundreds of miles away, and those neighbors know where their nearest neighbors are, and so on across the world. In the crisis, word is spread from family to family, so that a mighty squad of cloud giants could be assembled in time if need arises. Most cloud giant homes include one or more pets. Wyverns, griffins, giant eagles and owls, and other beasts of the sky are popular choices. Pets aren't limited to flying creatures, though. Any sort of creature might be found in a cloud giant menagerie, with rare specimens treated more as status symbol than as companions. Benevolent Overlords. Cloud giants are famous, or infamous, for demanding tribute from the humanoids that live beneath them. Such tribute is only proper from their perspective for two reasons. First, their presence in an area benefits everyone by driving away many evils, especially flying predators such as manticores and wyverns. Second, the giants believe they deserve to be rewarded for their forbearance. No one could stop them from simply taking what they want, but instead of doing that, they allow their tribute to be freely given. The logic of that position is clearer to the giants than it is to those on the other end of the arrangement. Much of the tribute that cloud giants accept is in the form of livestock and crops, but this isn't their only source of food. Cloud giants are avid gardeners. Almost all cloud giant strongholds devote space to a garden that produces enormous yields. Beans as big as turnips, turnips as big as pumpkins, and pumpkins as big as carriages. The garden of a cloud giant family is seldom affected by drought, frost, or locusts. When such a calamity strikes nearby farms, family have been known to share their bounty to ease the humanoids' food shortage. Such events are at the root of tales about magic beans and others about human family living in a cottage carved from a single enormous gourd. Beyond that, the cloud giants' generosity in times of want helps to cement their reputation as friends of humankind, a reputation that serves them well, even though it's not entirely deserved. Ordning of extravagance. A cloud giant's position within the ordning doesn't depend on talent or skill, it depends on wealth. The more treasure a cloud giant possesses, the higher its standing. It's as simple as that. Almost. Ownership is one thing, but wealth that's kept locked away means little. To fully contribute to one's status, wealth must be displayed, and the more ostentatious the display, the better. In the cloud giant family's home, extravagance is omnipresent. One might boast windows framed in gold leaf, rare perfume stored in vials of crystal with silver lids, or a scene in the sky depicted in a tapestry composed entirely of pearls. Another way for a family to demonstrate its wealth is by bestowing lavish gifts on other families. A gift from one family member to another doesn't prove anything about the family's largesse. No cloud giant truly believes that it's better to give than to receive. A family does so only with an eye toward how the giving can elevate its status. Memnor and his trickery play a role in this game. The very best gift, from the giver's perspective, is one that everyone believes to be far more valuable than it truly is. Only the giver and the receiver will ever know a gift's true value, and neither of them would ever reveal that a gift is worth less than it appears to be, because to do so would reduce the status of both. Wealth also changes hands between cloud giants when they indulge their obsession for gambling and wagering. Cloud giants don't engage in betting for enjoyment. It is less a form of entertainment than a type of bloodless feud. No cloud giant is a good loser, and one would be aghast to hear someone else say, "I lost 40 pounds of gold, but I had a good time." Betting wars between families can go on for generations, with fortunes and estates passing back and forth repeatedly. What a parent loses, a child hopes someday to win back. Plus, what the child wins back, a grandchild probably will eventually lose again. The tales that cloud giants tell of their ancestors are seldom about wars or magic or battles against dragons. They are about brilliant wagers won through boldness or deceit, and rival families brought to disgrace and ruin by the same. Masks of nobility. Ancient depictions of Memnor often show him wearing a two-faced mask. Because of this, cloud giant noblesse seldom show their faces, but instead wear exquisite masks of precious materials adorned with gemstones. Each noble has a collection of these masks that it wears to conceal its face but still reflect its current mood. An individual might change masks many times during the day as its emotions shift. A mask is prized for both its material value and for its accuracy in expressing the mood it represents. Only the richest of cloud giants can afford the dozens of masks necessary to show all the subtle differences in emotion possible among their kind. Artisans who can sculpt and craft masks that meet the cloud giant's exacting standards in such matters are richly rewarded for their skill. Fire giants. The fire giants were the officers, engineers, and crafters of ancient Ostoria. Their position and unparalleled skill, along with their domineering outlook, make them haughty and arrogant. Ordning of craft work. Fire giants are the greatest smiths, architects, and technicians among giant kind. The iron-lined halls of a fire giant stronghold, deep inside a mountain or a volcano, support the unimaginable weight of the stone above them and enable the giants to harness the heat of rivers of magma to power their forges. A fire giant's prowess in the occupation of crafting determines its place in the ordning. Although fire giants put stock in combat skill, they recognize that success in battle or on the hunt derives mainly from the quality of one's weapons and armor, and those that can fashion the finest gear enjoy the highest status in the clan. Master artisans, architects, and engineers select the best disciples to pass their knowledge on to, along with their standing. Often pupils are children or siblings of their teachers, but that's not always so. Leaders are chosen by general recognition from among the best crafters in the clan. One group of fire giants, known as the Dreadnoughts, owe their place in the ordning not to their crafting ability, but to their extraordinary physical prowess. They take on a lot of work for guarding the forges and keeping them stoked, effort without which the crafters couldn't succeed. Fire giants don't spend a lot of time crafting works of art, although they would maintain that all of their feats of metalworking and engineering are themselves forms of artistic expression. Beyond such accomplishments, true artwork is scarce among fire giants, and most of what exists is jewelry made from gems and ore that they mine and then refine. A unique form of art that some fire giants produce involves manipulating magma as it cools, forming it into fantastical, one-of-a-kind shapes. The most striking of these works are collected and displayed inside the stronghold, not unlike how other cultures create topiary gardens. Mighty fighters, poor planners. When fire giants aren't honing their crafting skills, they are drilling with weapons or exercising to keep themselves fit for battle. The typical fire giant has a mastery of combat tactics that few other warriors can match, but the giant's understanding of strategy is rudimentary. This deficiency isn't born from a lack of ability, but has its roots in tradition. In ages past, when the giants worked together to dominate the world, strategy was determined by the cloud giants and the storm giants. Ever since the clans went their separate ways after Ostoria's war against the dragons, the fire giants have not mounted a grand strategic effort to extend their sway, but they have fought countless skirmishes and other tactical engagements, mainly to solidify their hold on territory they have already claimed. If an ambitious fire giant ever became a master of strategic planning, little could stop a tribe of fire giants that enjoyed this additional advantage over their neighbors. Fire giants raise and train hellhounds as war dogs, and they sometimes persuade human wizards to harness fire elementals as guardians for their strongholds. Some allow trolls to roam free in rarely used parts of their fortresses, serving as perimeter guards of a sort. Trolls require little maintenance, able to survive on the fire giant's scraps and on dead or diseased slaves. They are tough enough to deter most intruders, and their susceptibility for fire makes them little threat to a fire giant. Slaves, labor-saving devices. It takes a lot of work to build and maintain a fire giant stronghold. Most of that effort comes not from the giants themselves, but from the slaves that they keep. Fire giants enslave other creatures to accomplish unskilled labor, so the giants can concentrate on the more vital aspects of foundry operation and crafting that only they are capable of. They aren't overly cruel masters, but neither are they particularly kind. They are uncaring about their slaves, because slaves aren't giants, and they are always more to be had if the supply runs low. Most creatures that fire giants capture are put to work in the giants' mines, or on surface farms the giants claim as part of their domain. Even master crafters of other races are consigned to unskilled labor, because so few of them have talents the fire giants consider skilled. Only creatures that have skills the fire giants need but don't practice, such as accounting, brewing, and medicine, are allowed to continue plying their trades. Skilled slaves receive better treatment, at least in the sense that an owner uses less force with a delicate tool. But as a rule, fire giants view humans in much the same way that humans view horses. They have utility if properly directed, and some might be prized for rare qualities, but even the smartest, best-trained horse isn't a person. That said, it's not unheard of for a fire giant to consult with a slave physician when it falls ill, or with a slave engineer right before beginning a difficult stage of tunnel excavation. Giants that stand low in the ordning are assigned to manage slaves and mining operations. Excavating mine shafts and digging out ore is important work, but smelting and metal work are valued more highly than effort spent keeping a tunnel from collapsing on slaves. Paying the price. Fire giants on many occasions have ransomed captives back to their families or communities, once the giants determined that the slave had no particular talent they needed, and others were willing to pay for its return. Affluent prisoners, such as merchants and aristocrats, are the most likely to win this sort of reprieve for obvious reasons. The ransom demanded rarely involves baubles such as gold or gems. Fire giants prefer payment in mithril, adamantine, or different slaves, one with more useful talents or stronger backs. Frost giants. Frost giants dwell in the remote, frozen places of the world. Anything warmer than the flesh of a recently killed elk is a flame to them. As a sailor fears the howl of the wind heralding a storm, the denizens of ice-capped mountains and northern steppes shudder at the war horns that presage the arrival of Thrym's blue-skinned icy children. Ordning of might. Position within the frost giant ordning is determined by sheer brute strength. Frost giants know that those that use cunning, agility, and magic are dangerous foes and can sometimes overcome pure strength, but never in a straightforward, fair manner. Enemies that act the way are Maug, and strength alone is Mort. Doubt or disagreement between frost giants over which is strongest is settled by a trial of strength. Such a contest typically involves wrestling, but can also be rock-throwing competition, a hunt, or one-on-one combat. To show proof of their superiority, frost giants keep and display trophies of their victims. Mammoth tusks, griffin beaks, and manticore tails adorn the walls of frost giant lairs. Formidable humanoid enemies are memorialized in trophies too, but only rarely do giants put their heads or bodies on display. A human hero's greatsword or a wizard's staff is a more appropriate trophy in such cases. A frost giant's armor and weapons are as much a record of its battle honors as its trophy collection is, for those who know how to read the signs. Notches carved into the haft of a weapon show the number and type of foes it has brought down. Horns, feathers, claws, and tusks affixed to helmets and armor serve as decorations commemorating the giant's greatest feats of strength. The ordning is determined by strength and strength alone, and there is no difference in physical prowess between the genders of frost giants. Most child-rearing duties are handled by the elderly of both sexes, not solely by females. It is considered highly mock to attack or challenge a pregnant female, even to improve one's standing, just as it would be to attack a frost giant as it slept. A frost giant that is innately weaker than its kin has a low rank in the ordning and practically no chance of rising any higher. At times, when a giant becomes intensely frustrated with that situation, it turns to clandestine worship of Vaprak, the deity of trolls and ogres. An individual touched by Vaprak's favor is transformed into an everlasting one, a giant with enough strength to rival the leaders of the clan, but destined to be cast out or destroyed if its secret allegiance becomes known. Because strength is their only standard of measurement, frost giants are more likely than other giants to welcome a non-giant into their group. The might of a human who hunts polar bears barehanded, as frost giants do, or who wrestles a frost giant into submission, can't be denied. Such a human could never become the chieftain of a tribe, but could earn a place of honor as one blessed by Thrym. Ruthless raiders. Frost Giant society has no industry to speak of. It takes what it needs from others, and if it can't take something, it has no need for it. Frost Giants do make leather, clothes, and bone tools and adornment from the animals they hunt, but those activities account for almost all of their craft work. When Frost Giants plan a raid on a nearby settlement or outpost, they time it to take place under the cover of a blizzard, believing the storm to be a sign from Thrym that the weak-boned humanoids are ready to be plundered, in the same way that the farmer might look at a rainstorm as a blessing from the harvest god. Frost Giants recognize two kinds of loot, Rod and Kvit. Rod, which means red, plunder, consists of living creatures, either livestock or slaves. Kvit refers to material goods, the most prized being objects of steel, alcohol, and large gems. Frost Giants like to grab gems for adorning their clothing, but ordinary currency is usually left behind after a raid. Tiny round coins simply have no worth to a Frost Giant. Because Frost Giants can't stand the heat of a forge, they don't mine their own metal or craft their own weapons and armor. The fire-forged items of steel and iron that they wield and wear are prized as though they were made of gold. The Giants are always on the lookout for such booty on their raids, but they don't often come across gear that is large enough for them to wear. Many of the Giants in the tribe boast arms and armor handed down from their ancestors. Others make do with items cobbled together from smaller parts. Shields sized for a human, for example, can be lashed together into a crude suit of scale armor. An anvil riveted onto a log serves as a warhammer. Masters of beasts. Frost Giants dominate wild creatures both as evidence of their strength and to use them as hunting companions. They don't, however, have much grasp of animal husbandry, so their pets are bullied and beaten into submission more than they are trained. When a Frost Giant commands a beast to attack, it's less a command than an acknowledgement to the creature that the giant won't beat it for satisfying its hunger. A creature that proves willful or that resists training is fated to end up on the giant's dinner table. The roster of creatures in a Frost Giant lair can include polar bears, winter wolves, and mammoths, but the giant's most prized living possessions are Remorhazes. Adult Remorhazes are untrainable by anything short of powerful magical compulsion, but one taken as an egg can be trained as it is raised. In fact, Remorhaz hatchlings are surprisingly pliant to the Frost Giant's manner of teaching by bullying. Hill Giants. Hill Giants live to eat. Anyone who understands this one fact about them knows everything there is to know. Ordning of gluttony. Hill Giants are the weakest of the true giants. They have the shortest stature, the smallest brains, and the least ambition. The only area in which they excel is girth. Since eating is the only thing Hill Giants care about, a tribe is always led by its fattest, heaviest member, the most successful and thus the most admired one in the group. The quality that other creatures expect or demand of their leaders, such as intellect, decision-making ability, and personal magnetism have no importance to hill giants. They are neither recognized nor rewarded, except to the extent that the hill giant with slightly above average smarts might use trickery or intimidation to grab more food than its neighbors. Dens of squalor and stench. Hill giants stuff the most repulsive, rotting things into their mouth without hesitation, suggesting that either they have no sense of taste or their hunger is so all-consuming that flavor isn't a consideration. Whatever the reason, the upshot is that hill giant dens are filthy, reeking places. Decaying carcasses and cracked bones are strewn about. The ground is saturated with blood and with a giant's own filth. Not every hill giant's digestive system is so indiscriminate. From time to time, a giant does get sick, but most of them recover and don't learn anything from the experience. The rare exceptions are called Mouth of Grolantor, giants that are confined and starved to the point of emaciation before being unleashed during a battle or a raid. The stench that exudes from a hill giant den might attract monstrous scavengers such as oozes, ropers, carrion crawlers, or otyuks. Hill giants don't domesticate or tend these creatures, but do tolerate their presence. A visit from a gelatinous cube or carrion crawler probably is the only housekeeping a hill giant's den ever sees. Ghouls are known to lurk around the edges of hill giant encampments, but they are less welcome than other kinds of scavengers. With their greater craftiness, especially if they are led by a ghast, ghouls can use simple trickery to steal the giant's meals. A hill giant wouldn't mind if a roper dragged away a few scraps, but it would be angry if a trio of ghouls stole an entire carcass. Stuff. Hill giants sometimes amuse themselves with inane games that typically involve food or eating. One such game is called Stuff, in which hill giants see how many halflings, gnomes, or goblins they can fit into their mouth at once without swallowing. Stone giants. Stone giants, reclusive, reflective, and inscrutable, take pains to remain apart from the world of sunlight and sky. Only when they are surrounded by stone do they consider themselves to be in reality. A world of all-encompassing stone is a realm of permanence and solidity, one where a lifetime of laborious carving can last through countless eons. The surface world, with its shifting light, endless sky, changing climate, and eroding wind, represents a dream state, an unreality where nothing lasts and therefore nothing has significance. Ordning of artistry. Among stone giants, mastery of an art ranks as the greatest virtue, and among all the arts, stone carving is held in highest regard. Most stone giants spend their lives in unending pursuit of the perfect artistic creation. Young stone giants practice tirelessly, hoping to prove themselves worthy of assisting the tribe's best carvers. A stone giant master carver might devote years to finding the best stone before beginning a great work. The best carvers are honored as the leaders and shamans of the tribe, and their hands are seen as holy, literally becoming the hands of scoria's stone bones as they work. Of course, not all stone giants have the hands of a god. Those who show little skill in carving are considered pathetic and viewed with a combination of pity and contempt. To determine the ordning beneath the highest levels of artistry, stone giants compete in games of boulder hurling and catching. Their rock-throwing skill suits stone giants well when they have cause to defend their homes or attack enemies. But even where boulder tossing is concerned, artistry is fundamental to the effort. A stone giant hurling a boulder isn't only performing a feat of strength, but is also striving to display consummate athleticism and grace. Those who can't infuse artistry into every aspect of their lives fall to the lowest rungs of the ordning and are often pushed literally to the perimeter of stone giant society to serve as guards on the tribe's most distant borders or as hunters that wander beyond those borders. As such, the stone giants are the first encountered by outsiders are almost always the least successful members of stone giant society and the poorest examples of the ideals stone giants aspire to. They are the brutes and boors cast out by a society of artists and philosophers. For a people that spend their lives mostly in darkness, stone giants have a nuanced appreciation of the effects of shadow and light. They design carvings to produce shadows in specific ways when the light source is placed in the proper location. Without both the light and the shadow, the carving is incomplete and can't be viewed in its true form. For example, a tail carving made with these special techniques tells one story when it's viewed in flat, dim light, but it reveals a second, much deeper tale with the addition of proper illumination. Speaking stones. Although they are unsurpassed masters of tale carving, stone giants also employ mundane writing in their stone tableau. Names, dates and descriptions appear in their tales, often as part of an image. Stone giants also make extensive use of the carved word through speaking stones. A speaking stone is an upright stone cylinder into which writing is carved in a descending spiral. When the cylinder is turned in one's hands, or when it's rotated with its base placed in a cradle designed to balance it upright, the writing can be read as the cylinder goes round. The message wraps around the pillar like the threads of a screw, but in two alternating spirals. The first is read from top to bottom as the cylinder rotates. Then the cylinder must be flipped over to reveal the second line of script, also read from top to bottom. Speaking stones are sized to match the length of the message they carry, so there is no blank space on a stone. A cylinder that turns out to be too long or too thick so that the message ends before the entire surface of the stone is used is considered poor artistry. Tradition and honor demand that it be crushed into gravel and a new speaking stone begun. Gentle giants? Newcomers who know only about the stone giants' focus on artistry might think them to be a peaceful and reasonable people. Among their own kind they tend to be so, but outsiders, particularly non-giants of any sort, are unwelcome in the stone giants' caverns, and trespassers aren't treated politely. A creature's first sign that it has intruded into a stone giant territory might be a boulder thrown seemingly from nowhere and exploding into shards against a nearby rock. Those who know anything about stone giants understand this wasn't a miss. It was a measured warning, and the next stone won't land so harmlessly. It's possible for travelers to negotiate with stone giants for safe passage through their territory. If someone in the group speaks giant and the giants are offered a tribute. Beautiful and large furs, exotic food or art objects are suitable tributes. Money is a weak inducement for all but the lowest of stone giants. If offered such enticements, one or two giants might come forward to negotiate while others remain at rock-throwing range. To unfamiliar eyes, stone giants encountered on the fringes of their territory look and behave like primitives. First, personal adornment has little value in the ordning of stone giants, so their clothing tends to be simple and practical. Second, these giants are the least accomplished members of the clan. They are good at ambushing and throwing rocks, but they aren't leaders or even typical examples of their kind. And even if the giants accept the offered tribute as permission to enter their territory, they might demand a higher price to pass through it. Usually this gift is a service of some kind, a task the giants would rather not do or that they are unable to perform, such as chasing kobolds out of a narrow cave or retrieving something from deep within a lake. Stone giants rarely keep pets. They sometimes cultivate colonies of giant bats at the edge of their territory, both for a food source and as a warning system against intruders. They also don't mind sharing their caves or ruins with cave bears, fire beetles, and other beasts that mean them no harm. They keep their other subterranean neighbors at arm's length. Purple worms are their greatest bane, because a hungry worm chews through everything it encounters, including the giant's finest carvings and sculptures. Zorns are among the few creatures that are appreciated by stone giants. Their passage through the earth causes no damage, and their alien modes of thought make them interesting to talk with. Life in the dark. Stone giants see well in darkness, and the caves and grottos where they live are kept dark most of the time. They don't prefer to use illumination for any purpose that's not related to creating or displaying art. Most of a giant's waking hours are taken up with meeting its responsibilities, whether that is a low-ranking pursuit or an artistic one. A tribe's chieftain or another leader, such as a shaman, determines when the tribe's guards and hunters are on or off duty. Other giants align their sleeping and waking schedules with stone giants higher in the ordning from whom they seek to learn. Masters of the arts can ask much of lower-ranking students, including waking early to be sure the master has food upon rising, or staying awake while the master sleeps to create something the master will need upon waking. For one reason or another, about 3/4 of a tribe's members are awake at any given time. When outside their settlements, stone giants travel almost exclusively in darkness, when they dare to visit the surface world, or at night, the better to avoid the glaring dreams and visions that would assail them during daylight. A stone giant that visits the surface for too long or is forced out from underground risks becoming lost in the realm of dreams, living ever after as a twisted version of its former self that the giants call a dream walker. the Linenstein. When a stone giant reaches the end of its tremendously long life, it joins the Linenstein, ancestors of stone. The term refers both to the giant's forebears and to the chamber inside each stone giant settlement where they reside. A dead, or sometimes merely dying, stone giant is carried into the ancestor's chamber and lean upright against the end of one of the rows of dead already there. The body gradually calcifies over many decades until it becomes indistinguishable from an enormous stalagmite. Family members visit this tomb chamber often to pay respects to their ancestors. Some of these visits, especially by elderly giants who know they will soon take their place there, last for weeks or even months. Storm giants. Storm giants, the most powerful and majestic of the giant kind, are also the most aloof and the least understood. They aren't just forces of nature, they are bound to nature and are extensions of it, in mystical ways that humans find hard to comprehend. Ordning of omens. Each storm giant knows its status in the ordning by the signals the universe sends them. Omens might be seen in the wheeling flight of a flock of birds, the patterns in sand left by a receding tide, the shapes of clouds, or any number of other natural phenomena. Storm giants that receive the greatest number of such messages generally rank highest, but the significance of individual signs can also affect one's status. On the rare occasions when storm giants meet, omens and signs accompany each individual, making it plain to all present who ranks where. Arguments about ranking within the ordning are rare, but all the giants in the group studiously examine every sign for evidence that one among them might be the greatest yet, since the revelation of that fact would be herald Anarm's return. Ever since Ostoria fell and Anarm abandoned his children, no sole king or emperor has ruled over giant kind. According to legend, the arrival of such a leader will be presaged by signs and omens in all the elements of the world: the sky, the sea, the continents, and the underworld. All of these are realms of the storm giants, which maintain a constant watch for the all-important signs. In ages past, when giant dynasties reigned, the signs that accompanied the leader of them all were clear and unmistakable. In the crawl of centuries since the empire's collapse, the few signs manifested have been muddled, conflicting, and contentious. For an obvious reason, every storm giant has a strong personal interest in how soon Anarm's return comes to pass. They all want to live to see it. Some individuals gain a measure of immortality for themselves by merging with elemental forces. These storm giant quintessence are the most reclusive of their kind, lairing in remote and inhospitable sites surrounded by brutal winds and murderous weather. Without an emperor to serve as their political and spiritual leader, the storm giants are adrift on an uncertain sea. Every possibility encapsulated in every sign is exhaustively examined. Debates over the meaning and validity of this or that omen are conducted across human kingdoms and spanning human lifetimes. Explorers and adventurers can find opportunity in this situation, since the giants sometimes hire agents that they dispatch to investigate portents and to retrieve items the giants need for their oracles. It's dangerous work for two reasons. The obvious one is that the task involves delving into Ostorian ruins that have been sealed for millennia. The less obvious one is that certain portents, if confirmed to be true, would indeed bring about the return of Anarm, upending the giant's social order and initiating a new age. Some would welcome such a change. Others would oppose it bitterly and do all they could to stop it, possibly resorting to all-out war. Out for themselves. In the absence of both Anarm and the worldly emperor, storm giants recognize no higher authority. Human, elf and dwarf kings, liches, grand sorcerers and wizards, all might amass what they consider great power, but they have no influence over the storm giants. Any who try extending their reach in that direction are guaranteed to come to grief. But as long as the world leaves the storm giants alone, the giants will leave the world alone. They wish neither good nor ill on the realms of humanity. They simply don't give much thought to the matter, except on the rare occasions when humans crop up in a prophecy or are hinted at by an omen. When storm giants do interact with non-giants, those on the receiving end of their attention might question the notion that storm giants are good creatures. They respect the principle of the sanctity of life, but even the calmest of storm giants has a tremendous temper. When one is roused to anger, principle gives way to fury, and an offense committed by one person against a giant can bring furious retribution down on an entire community. A storm giant that destroys a town and kills innocents in a fit of rage is likely to regret it afterwards, and might offer payment to make amends, though a sack of gold is likely little comfort to those who lost loved ones, homes, and livelihoods. It's always wise to tread softly, speak differentially, and act respectfully in the presence of a giant, but this is especially true of storm giants. Living on the edge. Once they are old enough to fend for themselves, storm giants spend most of their lives in contemplative isolation. Storm giants are capable of living wherever they choose, whether that's atop a mountain, in a glacial cave, or at the bottom of the deepest oceanic trench. One kind of location that invariably draws their attention is an elemental crossing, where the material plane and the elemental planes intersect and interact. Elemental influence pervades the architecture of storm giants and lends a tempestuous, unearthly quality to their homes. Storm giants use elemental crossings for their own transplanar wandering, especially into the elemental plane of air and the elemental plane of water. The frequent whirlpools, tornadoes, and lashing rainstorms that buffet the passages to those two planes help to safeguard the giants' homes and ensure their privacy. Although a storm giant prefers to live outside the company of other giants, it isn't necessarily alone in its stronghold. Storm giants share their abodes with other creatures that are comfortable in their environment. A sea-dwelling storm giant, for example, might have a few merfolk, water weirds, or even a dragon turtle for companions. While a storm giant living on a mountain peak would extend a friendly hand to any Pegasus that happened by, and might even welcome Yetis into its home for a time if it believed they could be trusted. The giant's guests are expected to be respectful, to make themselves useful, and to provide interesting conversation or other entertainment when the giant feels like being sociable. So much for the lore on giant folk. I hope you enjoyed this rather long video and found it relaxing. Maybe even learned something for your next campaign. As always, thank you very much for spending your time with me. Until next time, bye bye, fellas.